Japan and China have used a new military hotline for the first time on Tuesday. Years of negotiation culminated in a 20-minute phone call between the Japanese defense minister and his Chinese counterpart. A similar hotline has been in place between the Pentagon and the Chinese Defense Ministry since 2008, but that has not always worked. Washington says that Beijing refused to pick up the phone after shooting down a suspected Chinese spy balloon off of the U.S. coast back in February. You may remember that. The presence of the spy balloon also led U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to postpone a visit to China. But both sides have moved to improve what is an alarming lack of communication, especially given the growing tensions over Taiwan. President Joe Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, met with China's top diplomat, Wang Yi, last week. Here's the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman on those talks.
The two sides had candid, in-depth, substantive and constructive discussions on removing obstacles to improve China-US relations and prevent deterioration. The two sides also exchanged views on international and regional issues of common concern, including the Asia-Pacific situation and Ukraine. Both sides agreed to continue to make good use of this strategic communication channel.
Well, I'm joined now by Tong Zhao. He's a senior fellow in the nuclear policy program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He's also a visiting research scholar at Princeton University's Science and Global Security program. Mr. Zhao, it's good to have you on the program. I want to talk in just a moment about the dangers of how the Taiwan issue is being discussed inside China. But first, China and its links with the outside world. How dangerous is this lack of fast communication channels between the U.S. and Chinese leaderships?
Well, it's not really the lack of communication channels. The channels are already existing. There are actually more than one hotlines at senior official levels between the two sides. The challenge is how can we ensure the hotline and other communication channels will actually be used in a time of crisis. And so far, what we are seeing is often China refuses to pick up the phone because China wants to impose pressure on the other side at a time of crisis. And in China's own system, it is becoming increasingly centralized. So the military officials at the front line, they are also reluctant to answer the phone from their American counterparts because they need to first get approval from the political leadership before talking to the American officials. So that also makes it very hard to have substantive exchanges at a time of crisis.
Well, is that the problem, Mr. Zhao, that the hotline should actually be between whoever's in the White House and Xi Jinping? Because in China, Xi Jinping is at the top of the food chain, and he's the one who can make the decisions. I mean, are they not connecting the right people?
Well, there is actually a presidential level hotline between U.S. and China that was established in 1998, but it was rarely used, at least according to public report. It may also, be a result of the personal preferences of specific top leadership. Mr. Xi, for example, may not be so keen as in terms of his personality to respond quickly in a crisis and to give quick answers to his foreign counterparts. He may need time to think through, and that makes maybe him reluctant to use the phone to directly talk with the American president.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you could argue that he could answer the phone and say, President Biden, I need to think about it, I'll call you back. But obviously, he doesn't want to do that. These talks between Jake Sullivan and Wang Yi, what impact, if any, do you think they're going to have on, reestablishing a hotline and offering maybe paths to de-escalation?
I think it is a positive sign. For a long time, Chinese diplomats simply refused to communicate with their American counterparts. The American ambassador, Mr. Nick Burns, wasn't able to meet with his Chinese counterpart for months, after he arrived in Beijing. But now I think the Chinese side is showing a stronger interest in resuming some of the regular communication channels. There has been signs of resumed operational level engagement between the two sides, not necessarily on highly sensitive national security issues, but on less sensitive issues, climate change, economic relationship, etc. I think that demonstrates a willingness on Chinese part to gradually stabilize the U.S.-China relationship, because China is still very much dependent on American technology, resources, investments, etc.
Mr. Zhao, you recently published an article in Foreign Affairs. We've pulled a quote from that we want to share with our viewers because we think this really got our attention. You write, the dynamics among China's political leadership, its policy elite, and the broader public have generated an internal feedback loop that is not entirely within Xi's comprehension or control. This could result in China's being fully mobilized for war, even without Xi deciding to attack Taiwan. Now, that is a scary situation that you are describing. How likely is that to happen? In other words, war with China and the U.S. could break out, and Xi Jinping would really not want that to happen.
Well, I think it is important for the international community to understand how a very centralized Chinese system can generate a de facto mobilization towards war without anyone actually making an explicit decision to go to war. And this comes from, first and foremost, Mr. Xi's personal sense of mission to resolve the Taiwan issue. And that personal preference become such a strong incentive in a highly centralized system for the operational level officials, for the policy leads, to all cater to his vision and to amplify his own thinking. So everyone is trying to think of innovative ideas of how we can achieve coercive unification. No one raises questions about why do we have to do this on an accelerated time frame? Why the hurry? So no one is asking the basic question. Everyone tries to make it happen. I think that also makes the top leadership increasingly convinced that this is the right thing to do, and it's actually within China's capacity to do it. I think that's how this internal feedback loop is particularly dangerous.
Yeah, and at the National People's Congress back in March, Xi Jinping told his generals to be prepared for war. Now, if we put that in this feedback loop that you have described, he's basically telling them that a war is going to happen, isn't he?
Not necessarily. I mean, what he, according to what we know, is Mr. Xi wanted the military to develop the option, the capability, to take military action against Taiwan by 2027. That doesn't mean Mr. Xi has a desire to start war by 2027, because it's still common consensus within the international research community that China's top goal, option is to achieve unification through coercion, without actually fighting a war. But the thing is, when he orders the military to develop such an option, that sends a very strong incentive for the military to develop all sorts of capabilities, for the defense industry to also be highly mobilized, for the policy experts to generate ideas of how to build the necessary military means to fight and win a war, and how to build economic resiliency so that China wouldn't be undermined by international sanctions, how China can win international public opinion. Everyone is thinking in the same direction. No one is raising questions. There is no one that, there's no one to hit the brake
Well,
in the system that is already mobilized itself towards a war.
Is there anyone around Xi Jinping? We've got 30 seconds left here, Mr. Zhao. I mean, I'm just thinking what they're probably thinking in the White House about this. Is there anyone around Xi Jinping who has his ear who could say, Mr. President, we need to pull back, we're making a mistake? Is there someone who's willing to say that knowing that Xi Jinping may not want to hear it?
I don't think we know, but I personally haven't seen any evidence of senior level people willing to take the personal risk to question or challenge Mr. Xi's vision. Yeah,
and I think that's a very scary reality that you described there. Mr. Tong Zhao with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Fascinating talking with you. It helps us understand, though, a lot more about what's happening between Washington and Beijing. Thank you.
Thank you.